You don't expect betrayal to show up in khakis and a tucked-in button-down. You don't expect it to waltz in with a coffee in one hand and a legal folder in the other. But that's exactly how it started, with my nephew Derek strolling into Haynes Construction like he owned the place. I'd seen that walk before. It's the kind of stride you only earn after enough people stop questioning you, after enough yes and nods replace consequences. But he hadn't earned that walk here. Not in my company. The office smelled of concrete dust and printer toner that morning. I was already at my desk, flipping through blueprints for the McCullough project, when the door burst open. No knock. Just Derek, all teeth and smug confidence, like a man who mistook his uncle's patience for weakness. "Morning, Uncle Rich," he said, tossing his briefcase on the conference table like he was about to negotiate an oil deal. I raised a brow. "You forget how doors work, Derek." He smiled wider. "Sorry. Just excited." Excited. That's what he called it. He took a seat across from me without being asked. His eyes flicked to the office, my office, then back to me. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling the folder out and placing it on the table. "It's time I take on more responsibility around here." I leaned back in my chair, waiting for the punchline. "I mean, it's time you start thinking about retiring. Easing into that next chapter." Still no punchline. "You're 62, he added, as if that were a fact I'd somehow forgotten. "You built this place from the ground up, and I respect that. I really do. But we need to modernize. Get ahead of the curve." "Do we?" I asked, voice flat. "Yeah," he nodded eagerly. "And I've been talking to some people. Advisors, consultants, guys who can really take this company somewhere." "Somewhere that doesn't involve me?" I asked, keeping my tone casual, though I felt the first stirrings of heat in my chest. "No, no," he said quickly, hands raised like I'd just accused him of murder. "You'll still be part of things, of course. But more, symbolic. Like Chairman Emeritus." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a belly laugh. Just a sharp bark that echoed against the walls. Derek's face twitched. "And what's this?" I asked, tapping the folder. "Just some ideas," he said. "Preliminary paperwork. My lawyer says we can streamline things. Transfer financial authority, prep for succession. That lawyer know who's still on the license?" I asked, keeping my voice light, even as my fingers tapped the table. Derek didn't flinch, but he blinked. Once. "Quick. I'm just trying to think ahead," he said. "For the company's future." "No," I said, standing. "You're thinking about your future. Let's not dress it up." He stood too, meeting my eyes. "I've been working here 5 years. You've been cashing paychecks here 5 years, I corrected. "Working? That's still up for debate." He bit back a retort, I could see it. His jaw tensed, nostrils flared slightly, just like his dad used to do before losing his temper. My brother had a temper like a wild dog, snarling 1 minute, licking your hand the next. God, I missed that bastard. "You made a promise," Derek said suddenly, his voice quieter now. "To my dad. You said you'd take care of me." And there it was. The one weapon he had that might have worked. The one memory that still carried weight. I closed my eyes briefly. I could see it, clear as yesterday, my brother lying in that hospital bed, tubes in his arms, breath shallow. "Just look after the boy," he whispered, voice rasping with morphine and regret. "Keep him out of trouble." "I did," I said quietly. "I kept that promise longer than I should have." Derek took that as victory, mistaking sentiment for surrender. He smiled again and patted the folder. "Then you'll think about it?" I gave a short nod. "Sure. I'll think about it." He walked out of the office like a man who just closed a deal. I watched him go, then sat back down and opened the folder. It wasn't ideas. It was a blueprint for mutiny. There were draft contracts, proposed changes to our vendor agreements, even a new org chart with his name listed as CEO. All of it written in soft legalese, the kind that sounds polite while stabbing you in the back. And my name? Nowhere. No mention of the man who poured 30 years into this company, who bled for it when payroll came up short and the banks wouldn't lend. No mention of the man who built the damn thing with his own 2 hands and a rusted pickup truck. Just Derek, at the top. A smirking, suit-wearing parasite with a last name that wasn't even on the door. I closed the folder slowly, the pages whispering secrets back into the dark. The rage didn't come all at once. It trickled in like a faucet drip, quiet and steady. But beneath it, something colder stirred, something more dangerous. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to wait. Because if Derek thought I was just going to ease into retirement, he clearly didn't know the kind of man I used to be. And God help him, he had no idea what I was still capable of. A week after Derek's little power play, the changes began. Not loud ones, not dramatic. That's not how betrayal starts. It's quiet at first, subtle. Like mold behind a wall, it spreads before you even realize the rot set in. It started with the software. I came in on Monday morning to find my computer locked out of the project management system we'd been using for over a decade. A bright new interface greeted me instead, flashy, modern, full of drop-downs and tabs that made my head spin. I didn't recognize any of it. Thought we could try something more scalable, Derek said when I asked. He was standing behind my chair, sipping an iced coffee with a biodegradable straw. Clients expect innovation these days. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard like they didn't belong. On Tuesday, the contracts changed. Our supplier from Waco called and asked why we were restructuring our payment schedule. New terms, 45 days net instead of 30. I just wanted to confirm with you before signing, he said. I didn't authorize any new terms, I replied, already reaching for the folder on my desk. Oh, he said, surprised. Your nephew did. By Wednesday, the employees stopped knocking before entering Derek's office. They didn't come to me with questions anymore. I watched from behind the glass wall of my office, the same office I'd sat in for 23 years, as my foreman, Marcus, leaned into Derek's doorway like they were college buddies planning a tailgate. And that Thursday morning, my office was no longer mine. Hey Rich, Derek said, far too casual for what he was about to say. We're doing some internal restructuring. The architects are going to need your space, it's got better natural light, and you know how creatives are. We've set up a new office for you down the hall. Still a corner room. It wasn't a corner room. It was a glorified closet. No windows. No phone line. One chair, one desk, and a half-functioning printer that coughed more than it printed. I sat there, staring at the ceiling tile that had a water stain shaped like Nevada, and I realized something: this wasn't incompetence. This was a campaign. A slow, deliberate unraveling of my presence in my own company. The next Monday, Derek hosted a strategy breakfast. Bagels, fruit, printed agendas. He sent out a company-wide invite. My name wasn't on the schedule. I showed up anyway, took a seat at the back. Derek stood at the front, sleeves rolled up, whiteboard markers in hand like he was a Silicon Valley guru instead of a guy who once got suspended for stealing vending machine money in high school. We're entering a new era, he said. Haynes Construction is ready to scale. New tools, new partnerships, new energy. A few employees clapped. Most looked confused. We'll be implementing a tiered communication model, he continued, writing buzzwords on the whiteboard. From now on, department heads will report directly to me. That way we streamline decision-making. That was when I felt it. The final push. He wasn't just trying to edge me out. He was cutting the connection between me and my people. Marcus wouldn't come to me about site delays. Susan in accounting wouldn't ask about client invoices. My own foreman, who I'd hired straight out of trade school, now answered to a kid who thought wearing loafers made him a leader. The week after that, Derek asked if I'd considered liquidating my equity. "You could retire early, Uncle Rich," he said, sipping another one of his goddamn iced coffees. "Take a few cruises. Maybe invest in your daughter's art career." "She's doing just fine," I said, voice low. "I'm just saying, the shares are worth more now than they might be later. Think of it as exiting on a high note." I looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that his smirk twitched. "You're not subtle," I said. He laughed, but his fingers tightened on the cup. "Just looking out for you." That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat at the kitchen table in my house, the same house I built myself when I was 35, and drank decaf out of the same mug Linda used to use. I stared at the framed photo of our first crew, me, my brother Tom, and 3 other guys standing in front of a half-built barn, all sunburnt and smiling. Tom had been the dreamer. I'd been the realist. He believed in second chances. That's why, when he lay dying, he asked me to give Derek one. I'd honored that promise. For years, I had protected the boy, coached him, cleaned up his mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake anymore. This was a takeover. The following day, I noticed the company's letterhead had changed. The logo was sleeker, modernized. The tagline beneath read, "Haynes Construction, built for the future." No mention of the past. No mention of me. That night I opened my safe. I hadn't touched it in over a year. Inside were 2 things, the original articles of incorporation for Haynes Construction, and the operating deed Tom and I signed when we first became a licensed LLC in the state of Texas. They were old, yellowing in places, but perfectly preserved. My name was on every page. My signature, my credentials. I was still the sole legal founder. Derek's name? Nowhere. He had no idea. I placed the documents on the table, then poured myself a glass of water. "Ease into retirement," he said. He had no idea that I was just getting started. I used to believe silence meant peace. That quiet in the office meant people were focused, working, respecting the job. But lately, the silence at Haynes Construction had changed its tone. It wasn't calm. It was cloaked. Watchful. On a Friday evening, long after most of the team had clocked out and the fluorescent lights buzzed like gnats overhead, I sat in the new office Derek had assigned me. I was finishing up an old bid estimate, real work, not strategy decks, when I heard it. Voices. Close. The break room was just down the hall. The door must have been slightly open, because the words drifted in soft, low, and sharp. "He won't last long." Derek's voice. I froze mid-type. My fingers hovering above the keyboard. I turned my chair slightly, angling my head toward the open space. The hum of the vending machine muffled things, but I could still catch it, like tuning an old radio. "Uncle Rich doesn't even know what's happening," Derek said, his tone smug, like he was unwrapping a gift. He's still clinging to this old-school idea that loyalty matters in business. A pause. Then laughter, his own and someone else's. A man. Deep-voiced. Confident. "Once he's out, the company's mine," Derek continued. "Not ours. Not the family's. Mine." I rose from my chair slowly, every movement measured. My boots made no sound against the thin carpet. I stood just outside the doorframe, still out of sight, and listened. "I've already lined up a branding agency," Derek said. "We'll rebrand completely, Haynes Construction will be history. New name, new leadership, new direction." "You think he'll go quietly?" the other man asked. Please, Derek scoffed. He's sentimental. He'll sulk for a bit, maybe complain to a lawyer, but in the end, he's tired. He'll take the check and vanish. Just make sure he signs, the man warned. Oh, he will, Derek replied confidently. I've got the documents ready. We'll throw a little family board meeting, dress it up with cupcakes and nostalgia. He'll think we're including him, but really, it's just the send-off. There was another laugh. Chairs scraped. Feet shuffled. I stepped back into the shadows of my office as they left the break room, my heart pounding slow and steady like war drums in my chest. Their footsteps faded down the hall. I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I sat back down and stared at my screen. Cupcakes and nostalgia. He didn't just want me gone, he wanted to erase me. Turn my name into a historical footnote in a company I built from sweat and sawdust. My hands curled into fists on the desk. Not from rage. From something colder. Sharper. It was in that moment I knew I wasn't just going to block his plan. I was going to flip it. Over the next few days, I watched him. I watched everyone. Derek strutted through the office like a rooster in a henhouse. Every conversation he had was in hushed tones or behind closed doors. He started wearing a Bluetooth headset like he was some kind of tech mogul, always jumping on a call, always sealing a deal. The employees played along. Some because they were loyal to him. Most because they were scared. He brought in a guy named Carl, an outside consultant who smelled like expensive cologne and made a show of shaking hands too hard. Carl didn't even try to hide his condescension when he looked at me, like I was the relic in the museum they forgot to dust. Change is tough, Carl told me once with a pitying smile. But necessary. You should be proud. Not many founders get to see their company evolve in real time. I just nodded and handed him a stale donut. Let the wolves feel full before the trap snaps shut. Derek's language shifted too. We became I. Uncle Rich became the founder. My office, he started calling it the archive room. He moved fast. New website. New uniforms. Even the company trucks got stripped and rewrapped with a sleek minimalist logo that looked like it belonged on a line of yoga mats. The kicker. He changed the company motto. Used to be something simple, true, built to last. Built together. He replaced it with, Haynes, reimagining construction. I found one of the new marketing brochures in the trash and fished it out. There was a photo of Derek on the back, arms crossed, blazer pressed, standing in front of a crane he never operated a day in his life. Below it read, Derek Haynes, CEO and visionary. No mention of me. Not even a passing nod. At night, I'd sit on the back porch with a tumbler of iced tea and go over old documents. The original deed. Our licensing agreements. Tax filings. Anything that still carried my signature at the bottom. And slowly, I began to see the gaps in his plan. Places where he'd skipped steps or assumed too much. He was trying to bury me. But he didn't know where the bones were kept. On a Tuesday morning, I stopped by the office early. Earlier than usual. Before sunrise. I sat in the main conference room and watched the sun rise over the parking lot through the blinds. Derek came in late. 10 minutes after start time. Starbucks in hand. He didn't even notice me sitting there. When he did, he gave me a tight smile. Hey, Rich. Didn't expect to see you in this early. Just couldn't sleep, I said, leaning back in my chair. Too much excitement in the air. He nodded, mistaking my calm for acceptance. I get that. Big things coming. He was right. Big things were coming. Just not the kind he expected. Because I'd heard the whispers. And now. I was ready to make some noise of my own. There's an art to revenge. A rhythm. People think it's loud and sudden, slamming fists and shouted threats. That's the kind of vengeance that burns out quick and leaves ashes behind. But real revenge? The kind that changes things. That's quiet. That's slow. That's methodical. And I had time. Derek, in his rush to reinvent the company, never once thought to look backward. He thought the future was his playground. That arrogance was his first mistake. I spent the better part of the next week digging through every file I'd ever saved, paper and digital. Not just the stuff he could access, but the old stuff. The stuff before his time. Boxes in the attic. Binders in my garage. Hard drives in a fireproof safe behind my workshop. Derek thought he was building the future. What he didn't know was that the past was still mine. I started with the basics. The business license. Still in my name. The operating deed Tom and I signed back when we incorporated. Derek wasn't even born yet. And that little oversight meant something legally binding. Without my license and signature, Haynes Construction didn't exist. Not as it was. Not as it ever could be. Derek never asked about licensing. He just assumed. He thought once he wore the blazer and started using buzzwords, the world would hand him the keys. He had no idea the car still needed my thumbprint to start. Then came the will. My lawyer, James Corley, had been with me since the beginning. Old school, like me. Still kept physical files in a locked cabinet and wrote notes in pen. I called him up and scheduled a lunch at our usual spot, a diner off Route 12 with chipped booths and the best corned beef hash in Texas. He slid into the booth across from me, eyes sharp under wire-rimmed glasses. "You sound serious," he said, not bothering with small talk. "I am," I said. "I need to update the will. And I need to protect everything." "You mean the business?" he asked, leaning forward. "Everything," I said. "House. Land. Accounts. The company. I want it all moved into a trust." He studied me. "Daughter still listed as next of kin?" "She is. And she stays that way. Even if she doesn't want the business. She won't have to run it. She'll own it. That's enough." James nodded and pulled out a yellow pad. "We'll create a living trust. You'll be the trustee while you're alive. When you pass, your daughter gets everything. We can structure it so Derek gets nothing." "Make sure of it," I said, my voice low. "And I want to protect it now. Before he tries anything stupid." "Has he?" James asked. "Not yet," I said. "But he's circling. Like a vulture." James didn't ask more. Just scribbled a few notes and waved over the waitress. That's the thing about old friends, they know when not to talk. By the time I got back to the office that afternoon, Derek was already in the middle of one of his team alignment meetings. A giant laminated whiteboard leaned against the wall. Phrases like synergy and asset leverage were scribbled across it like gospel. Half the staff looked bored. The other half looked confused. I stood just outside the doorway, arms crossed. He noticed me and winked. "Uncle Rich," he called, gesturing dramatically. "We were just talking about how we can elevate legacy into strategy." I gave him a slow nod. "Sounds important." He grinned, mistaking sarcasm for praise. "You should join us. See how we're shaping the next chapter." "No need," I said. "I'm just the legacy, remember." A few of the employees glanced away awkwardly. Derek let the moment pass, but I saw the flash in his eyes. He didn't like being reminded I still held the reins. Back in my office, the storage closet, really, I made one more call. This one to my daughter, Sarah. She answered after 2 rings. "Dad?" "Hey sweetheart," I said. Her voice alone made something in my chest ease. "How's New York?" "Loud and weird," she said, laughing. Like always. Why? I'm updating the trust, I said. Your name's still listed. She was quiet for a second. You know I don't want the company, right? I know, I said. But you're still my heir. Doesn't mean you have to run it. Just means no one else gets to. Another pause. Is this about Derek? I sighed. It's about making sure the right people get what they earned. She didn't push. That's what I loved about her. She didn't want control. She just wanted the truth. Okay, she said finally. Do what you need to. Just don't let him push you out. He already tried, I said. But I've still got the shovel. After we hung up, I went back to my desk and stared at the framed photo of my brother. Tom was in his 20s in that picture, grinning like a fool, covered in sawdust, arms slung around my shoulders. We'd just landed our first big contract. A small clinic south of Dallas. We built it ourselves. No subs. No frills. Just two brothers and a dream. I kept my promise, I said quietly. I gave the boy a chance. I looked out the window, well, the hole in the drywall that someone called a window. I could hear Derek's voice down the hall, still selling his future like it was already paid for. But the thing he didn't understand was this: the foundation of a company isn't made of slideshows and slogans. It's made of paperwork. Signatures. Legal bindings. And I had every one of them. I wasn't going to fight Derek with fists or fury. I was going to bury him in facts. In notarized truths and clauses he never bothered to read. And when the time came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd just raise the documents. The invitation came in the form of a company-wide email. Subject line: Family Board Meeting, Mandatory Attendance. The body was full of vague bullet points: strategic direction, succession planning, long-term growth. But I didn't need to read between the lines. I already knew what this was. Derek was ready to make his move. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m., in the main conference room. A catered brunch, he added. Let's talk about the future over quiche and coffee. The arrogance of it. Like this was some TED Talk, not a company built on busted knuckles and 14-hour days. He sent a separate email just to me, trying to dress it up. Uncle Rich. I know change can be tough, but I hope you'll come into this meeting with an open mind. There's an opportunity here, for both of us. Let's make it smooth, respectful, and beneficial. You deserve that much. Derek. Beneficial. That word stuck in my teeth like a bone. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a drawer in my old oak desk, one of the few things left in that office that still felt like mine, and pulled out a folder of my own. Thick. Heavy. The kind of folder that didn't just talk, it proved. Inside, notarized amendments to our operating agreement, documents showing sole licensing rights under my name, the trust papers assigning all controlling shares to my daughter. Each page stamped, signed, and sealed. Legally bulletproof. The fruits of 3 decades and a month of careful revenge planning. By Wednesday, Derek was strutting through the halls like a man already crowned. He'd stopped calling me Uncle Rich. Now it was just Rich. Like I was a retired coach sitting on the sidelines while the new quarterback took the field. He brought in Carl again, the consultant with the expensive shoes and cheap advice. Carl walked around the office like a landlord, peeking into offices, shaking hands like he was buying votes. You're going to love this new direction, he told one of the site managers. Total modernization. Efficient. Scalable. I followed behind him like a ghost, watching the way employees looked over their shoulders. No one knew which way the wind was blowing anymore. That was fine. Storms always start with confusion. The day before the meeting, Derek had the nerve to have new business cards printed. Derek Haynes. CEO, Haynes Construction Group. The cards were left on the front desk in a neat stack. I pocketed one, turned it over in my hand. No phone number. No address. Just a name, a title, and a future he hadn't earned. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping my tea and listening to the cicadas sing their one-note song. The heat clung to the wood of the railing. Texas in early summer, it doesn't ask for patience. It demands it. Same as revenge. I thought of my brother again. The way he used to swing a hammer like it was part of his arm. The way he used to talk about building legacy. He would have hated what Derek had become. Slick, hollow, all hat and no cattle. But he wasn't here. So I'd speak for him. Friday came fast. I wore a dark button-down, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows. No tie. No blazer. I didn't need a costume to show up with power. The conference room smelled like pastries and ego. A long table was set with name cards. Derek sat at the head, flanked by Carl and two men I didn't recognize, lawyers, by the look of them. A monitor displayed a digital slide with bold white letters, "The Future of Haynes Construction." Employees filled the seats along the sides, some from the office, some from the sites. Marcus, my old foreman, gave me a nod as I entered. Susan from accounting looked nervous, clutching a pen like it was a life raft. I didn't sit yet. I stood at the back, hands in my pockets, watching. Derek smiled, arms open like a preacher before a sermon. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Today's about moving forward. About growth. And about finally aligning our leadership with where this company is headed. He clicked the remote. A new slide appeared, merger and expansion strategy. I've been working with Carl and some trusted advisors, he said, gesturing like a game show host. We've secured a preliminary merger agreement with Colton Davis Partners, one of the biggest construction firms in the Southwest. There were murmurs. That name had weight. This is big, he said. We're talking new markets, national clients, more revenue than we've ever seen. But there's one thing we need to make it happen: clarity of leadership. He turned toward me then, eyes full of fake sincerity. I've asked Rich to consider stepping down, not out of disrespect, but out of respect for what he's built. This move honors his legacy while making room for the future. Carl passed out folders. Each one contained the same thing: a merger packet and a voluntary retirement agreement, with a tidy buyout figure at the end. Then came the final blow. Derek slid a legal-sized document down the table to me, bold text across the top: power of attorney authorization. This just formalizes everything, he said smoothly. One signature, and we're off to the races. Every eye turned to me. Some confused. Some hopeful. I reached slowly for the pen. Lifted it. Then set it down. Silence. I picked up the document, reading it out loud. Authorizes full financial and operational control to Derek Haynes. I paused. Interesting clause here. Did you all see it? I turned the paper so the others could read. Buried halfway down, gives Derek the ability to dissolve existing shares. Including mine. Someone gasped. Carl paled. Derek opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Let me make this simple, I said. Without my signature, this company doesn't merge. It doesn't rebrand. It doesn't move forward. My name is still on the license, the deed, the contracts. I am not a figurehead. I opened my folder and laid it on the table. Original license. Operating deed. Updated trust. All in full view. And then, calmly, I leaned forward. You think I didn't know what you were planning? I said. You think I'd walk into this room without already having built my counterattack? Derek's smirk broke like a cracked windshield. And for the first time, I saw it, the flicker of doubt. He knew. He'd played his hand. And he'd lost the table. You can always tell when someone realizes they've gone too far, because their voice tries to keep pace with the lie while their eyes start looking for the exit. Derek's voice didn't break right away, but his face did. That smug, rehearsed grin he'd been wearing all morning cracked like plaster under pressure. The employees noticed. Carl noticed. Hell, even the damn lawyer who hadn't said a word until now leaned slightly away from him like he didn't want to be caught in the blast radius. I watched the color drain from my nephew's face as he flipped through the documents I just laid out like a royal flush at the table. Original license in my name. Articles of incorporation, also mine. And then the last piece, a notarized letter from the Texas State Contractor Licensing Board confirming that without me, Haynes Construction's license would be suspended pending review. Derek blinked fast. Uncle Rich, this isn't necessary. Necessary? I echoed. You brought in lawyers, consultants, merger agreements, and a power of attorney document with my name already typed in the signature line. You thought I'd just sign it like a fool. I was just trying to streamline things, he said, voice shaky now. Make things easier for everyone. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms. Funny. You didn't mention that clause about dissolving ownership when you handed me the pen. You were streamlining all right, straight to my bank account. Susan from accounting gasped. Carl shifted uncomfortably in his chair. One of the site supervisors, a guy named Eli who'd worked with me since we built the first municipal center in Dallas, stood up. You were trying to cut Rich out? He asked, looking between us. Derek held up a hand. That's not what this is. Bullshit, Eli snapped. You've been making moves for months. Treating this like it's your personal startup. You had us thinking he was retiring. That he was okay with all this. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Derek was unraveling himself. Carl finally spoke. Derek, I was told everything was already cleared. That the founder had signed off on this. That's what he told me too, said the lawyer on Derek's right, flipping through his own copy of the agreement. Derek stood now, papers clenched in his fist. Okay. Okay, look. Maybe I moved too fast. But it's because I care about the company. About our future. Our future. I said quietly. You don't care about this company. You care about owning something that someone else built. There was silence in the room, one of those silences that doesn't land soft. It hits hard, presses down on everyone until someone shifts under the weight. Derek's breathing was shallow now, his jaw tight. I could see him calculating, wondering if there was still a way to spin this. There's still a merger opportunity, he said. We could do it together. Share the credit. I don't want to fight you. No, I said. You wanted to bury me. But you're just now realizing the grave you dug was your own. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. My voice was calm, clear. This meeting is over. I still have authority, Derek started. No, I cut him off. You don't. I turned to the lawyer Derek had brought in. Check the articles of incorporation. Check the operating deed. I am still the sole voting member with authority to override all financial decisions. The lawyer looked down. Nodded once. Derek's voice cracked. Uncle Rich, please. I turned to the employees instead. For those of you who came here to work, not to manipulate, not to play politics, you've still got a job. We've still got projects. But this man, I pointed to Derek, is no longer your superior. That got a reaction. Some employees whispered. Others nodded. Marcus muttered, damn right, under his breath. Derek looked around the room, desperate now. Carl, tell them. But Carl was already gathering his things. I don't represent companies involved in internal fraud, he said, without even looking at him. Derek stared at me, jaw trembling. "You can't do this." I walked over to the front of the room, picked up his glossy marketing folder, and flipped it open. On the last page was a projection slide, 2025, the year of reinvention. I tore it in half. I already did. Then I turned to the lawyer. "I want a letter drafted today. Termination of Derek Haynes from all operational roles effective immediately. Make sure it goes out to every department. Every vendor. Every client." He nodded. Derek just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "You think this is over?" he finally said. "You think you've won?" I stepped close enough that only he could hear me. "I didn't just win," I whispered. "I let you build the gallows with your own hands." Then I stepped back, turned to the team, and said, "Let's get back to work." As I walked out of the room, the employees parted like a tide. No one looked at Derek. No one offered to help him gather his files. The only sound was the rustle of torn paper and the slow squeak of his overpriced shoes as he turned, stunned and silent. He'd come for a coronation. Instead, he got his execution. The storm had passed, but the tension lingered. After the meeting ended and the last of the employees cleared out, eyes wide, whispers swirling behind them, I stayed behind for a while. I watched the dust settle. Watched Derek gather his documents with trembling hands, jaw clenched like it was the only thing keeping him from screaming. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The documents had spoken for me. Eventually, I walked back to my office, the good one, the real one, not that glorified broom closet he tried to stick me in. I closed the door and sat behind my desk like I had for the past 23 years. My chair creaked the same way it always had, like it was greeting me. Like it knew I'd never truly left. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. I knew it'd be him. "Come in," I said. Derek stepped inside, shutting the door behind him like a teenager about to confess to a broken window. The false confidence was gone. The consultant swagger, the marketing jargon, the smooth-talking executive, none of it followed him into that room. What stood there now was just a kid who'd been caught with his hand in the family safe. "Uncle Rich," he started, voice low. I said nothing. Just leaned back in the chair and waited. He shifted his weight, eyes scanning the room like he was trying to find a foothold. "Look," he said finally. "I know that didn't go the way it should've. But we're family. And maybe we both made some mistakes." I almost laughed. Mistakes. That's what he was calling it now. "I got ambitious," he admitted. "Too ambitious. I see that. But I was trying to grow the company. Take it to the next level." "You tried to erase me," I said evenly. His jaw tensed. "That's not true." I pulled open the drawer beside me and took out the power of attorney form, the same one he tried to slide across the table earlier. I set it on the desk between us. "You typed my name into a document that would have given you complete control over the company's finances, operations, and ownership. You did it behind my back, then lied to my employees about my retirement. Don't call it ambition. Call it what it is." He didn't respond right away. Just stared at the paper like it might set itself on fire. Then, "Okay. I screwed up. But we don't have to blow it all up. We can restructure. Work together. I'll step back, maybe take a different role. We don't have to end this like enemies." I studied him for a long time. For a moment, I saw Tom's face, his father's face, superimposed over Derek's. Same eyes. Same jaw. Different heart. "You're not my enemy," I said quietly. "You're my brother's son. And for a long time, that was the only reason you had a seat at this table." I stood slowly, the leather chair creaking behind me. But family doesn't try to steal from each other. Family doesn't undermine. Family doesn't plot. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I gave you a chance. More than one. I protected you because your father asked me to. But that protection's gone now. You're really cutting me out completely, he asked, eyes flaring with that old fire, the defiance I'd seen since he was 16 and getting suspended for hacking the school's grading system. After everything I've done for this company? I walked over to the window and pulled the blinds up. Outside, the crews were prepping the site across the street. Backhoes rumbling. Steel clanking. Boots crunching gravel. It was the sound of real work, honest work. You think you've done something for this company? I said. You spent 5 years talking. Selling ideas. Delegating. Dressing it up. But you never built anything. Not with your hands. Not with your sweat. I turned back toward him. I built this company. Brick by brick. Contract by contract. And I didn't do it for money or fame. I did it because it was mine. Because it mattered. I stepped closer. You wanted to push me out. You're out instead. Permanently. You're being bought out. No shares. No say. No second chance. His mouth twitched. You can't do that. I already did, I said. He exhaled sharply, rage and disbelief crashing together. You're throwing away your own nephew. Your family. I'm saving what your father helped me build. Silence. Just the hum of the air conditioner kicking in. Then, Derek's face shifted. The defiance melted into something else, something quieter. Defeat. I didn't think you had it in you, he muttered. That's because you never knew me, I replied. He turned and walked out of the office without another word. No slamming doors. No final threats. Just silence. I sat back down and opened my calendar. I had calls to make. Crews to check on. A company to run. And not a single voice in my head asking, was it too harsh? Because it wasn't. This wasn't harsh. This was clarity. Long overdue. Once the buyout was finalized and Derek's name was officially scrubbed from every company record, I could have stopped there. Legally, I had everything. I'd secured control, reclaimed the brand, re-established my name in the office. But the thing is, Derek hadn't just tried to take my company. He tried to rewrite me. He paraded around with business cards that said, CEO. He pitched clients with phrases like, out with the old. He even drafted a press release, never published, but printed and buried in one of the folders I found during the meeting. The headline read, Haynes Construction enters new era under bold leadership of Derek Haynes. Like I had already died. So no, it wasn't enough to win. He needed to lose. I started with his network. I still had contacts from the old days, men and women who ran contracting firms, supply chains, regional agencies. Derek had started sniffing around them months earlier, trying to position himself as a rising star. What he didn't know was that those people weren't just names in a CRM, they were friends who'd poured drinks with me, broken ground with me, celebrated wins and weathered loss. I made a few calls. Didn't have to twist any arms. Just told the truth. Derek tried to take the company out from under me, I said. He falsified a power of attorney, hid documents from staff, and nearly triggered a merger with zero board approval. There was always a pause, and then, you're kidding. I wish I was. The next week, he was blacklisted from 2 industry events. Then 3 vendors quietly cut ties. A few HR reps from smaller firms he'd flirted with called me directly to ask for the full story. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't need to. I just laid out what he did, and what it meant. He became radioactive. Word spread like wildfire in this business. Construction may span cities, but the inner circle is small. And betrayal? That stinks forever. Then came the financial side. Derek thought the reduced buyout was his fallback, just enough cash to ride out the embarrassment, maybe start something on his own. What he didn't realize was how deep his expenses went. During his time in the office, he'd gotten used to a lifestyle funded by the company, leased vehicles, an upscale condo, dinners charged to a corporate card. Once all that dried up, he had to face the real numbers. And he didn't like them. How do I know? Because I got a call from his banker. "Mr. Haynes," she said, voice tight, professional, "I just wanted to verify if Derek's remaining ties to Haynes Construction still entitle him to the corporate rate on his mortgage." "No," I said. "He's no longer affiliated with us. At all." Another pause. A longer one this time. "Understood." Later, I heard through a mutual contact that Derek had tried applying for a business loan, wanted to start a consulting firm, whatever that meant. But his application stalled when the bank flagged the sudden drop in income, the failed merger attempt, and the public termination record I'd submitted. By the end of the quarter, he was living in a rental half the size of his old place and had sold off that fancy Rolex he used to flash at staff meetings. Poetic. But the part that truly made it feel like revenge? That came 2 weeks later, when he tried crawling back. It was late in the afternoon, sun bleeding across the job site, painting the dirt in long shadows. I was inspecting a concrete pour when I saw a familiar car pull up, one of the few things he hadn't sold yet. Derek stepped out, dressed in jeans and a collared shirt like he was trying to blend in. He walked up to the fence, but didn't come through. Just leaned against the post, watching. I didn't approach him. Let him wait. Eventually, I finished up and walked over, wiping sweat off my brow. He cleared his throat. "Hey, Rich." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think I'd see you out here." He trailed off, looking down. "I heard you were back on site. Thought I'd stop by. See how things were." "They're steady," I said. "Busy. Productive." He nodded slowly. "That's good. Really good." Silence stretched. Then he said, "I've been reevaluating some things. Looking for opportunities. Thought maybe, if you had room, I could consult. Part-time. Off the books even." It took everything in me not to laugh. "You want to consult for me?" I asked. "Just until I get back on my feet," he said, eyes pleading now. "I know I screwed up. But I still know the systems, the pitch decks. I can help." I leaned on the fence beside him, looking out at the crew pouring concrete, sealing what we'd built, what I had built, with their own hands. "You were willing to erase me," I said softly. "You typed up the papers, planned the speech, even rebranded the company. And now you want back in because the water's colder than you expected." He didn't respond. So I turned to him and said, "I'm not your safety net, Derek. I was your second chance. And you torched it." He swallowed. "So that's it?" "That's it." He left without another word. As I watched his car disappear down the road, the sun dipped low behind the steel beams of the site. The light cut across the foundation like a blade. Some men build. Others take. And when the takers fall, they never understand why no one offers a hand to help them back up. A week after Derek tried to walk back into my life, I got a call from Susan in accounting. "Rich," she said, trying to suppress a laugh, "you're going to want to see this." She forwarded me a screenshot of a local business journal article. There it was, clear as day. Ex-executive of Haynes Construction denied commercial license over fraud allegation. Apparently, Derek had applied to start a new company. He listed his former leadership role at Haynes Construction as proof of experience. But the licensing board flagged it. Between the revoked ownership, the blacklisted merger attempt, and the paper trail of the forged power of attorney, they shut him down cold. No license. No company. No future in construction, at least not where his name would be on anything. I stared at that headline for a long while. Not with triumph. Not with smugness. Just a slow, quiet exhale. It was done. The empire my brother and I had built was mine again. Not because I shouted the loudest, or because I moved the fastest, but because I was willing to play the long game. I had let him run wild just far enough to hang himself with his own rope. And now, I had peace. The following Monday, I walked onto the site of our latest municipal project. A massive rec center going up on the south end of town. Heat rose off the steel like steam. My boots sank slightly into the dust as I stepped onto the slab foundation. "Morning, boss," Marcus called from across the lot. "Morning," I called back. No meetings. No agendas. No betrayal waiting around the corner. Just the sound of hammers, drills, engines, real work. I did a full loop of the site, checking equipment, asking questions. The crew was tight. Focused. Every man and woman knew their role, and more importantly, they trusted leadership again. Not because of a title or a fancy email signature, but because I'd stood in front of them, not above them. Back at the office that afternoon, I sat down to finally clean out a few things Derek had left behind. His desk was still full of glossy brochures, half-finished pitch decks, and doodled logo rebrands. He'd even written down slogans. One said, "Haynes 2.0, building the future with vision." I tossed it in the shredder. This company didn't need 2.0, it needed roots. It needed grit. It needed someone who remembered that pouring concrete in July wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. A few days later, I got a call from my daughter. "Dad," she said, "the trust paperwork came through. I saw what you did." "I figured it was time," I said. "You may never want the company, but if something happens to me, I don't want some bastard crawling in through the side door." There was a pause on the line. "I know we've had our distance," she said. "But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You didn't just protect the business. You protected our family name." That landed heavier than she probably meant. I looked at the photo on my wall, me and Tom, back when we finished our first job together. We were covered in drywall dust, grinning like idiots. "You're always welcome back," I said. She laughed. "I'll stick to painting, but, yeah. I might visit more." We hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something crack open. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just clarity. I didn't burn bridges. I built walls high enough to keep the rot out. Derek, from what I heard, tried to get work at a handful of smaller firms. None of them bit. One sent me an email asking for a reference, and I responded honestly, "He's ambitious. But untrustworthy." I didn't have to say more. The email bounced back with, "Thanks." That's all we needed. A month after that, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Uncle Rich. I get it now. You weren't just protecting your company. You were protecting what it stood for. I thought it was about power. But it was about trust. And I broke that. You won't hear from me again. Just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Derek." I folded it once, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and closed it. Not because I forgave him. But because it no longer mattered. The final layer of this whole mess was closure. Not fire. Not noise. Just silence. That Friday, I took the crew out for beers. Nothing fancy, just cold bottles, tired laughter, boots kicked off, and stories passed around like poker chips. At one point, Marcus raised his glass. "To the boss," he said. "The one who actually earned it." I didn't say anything. Just nodded, took a sip, and let the weight slide off my shoulders. The company was safe. My name was intact. The legacy, preserved. And Derek? He learned what happens when you try to rob a builder. You might take a swing at the house. But you'll never own the foundation.